is ready to go.
Ready.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the agenda for the West Haymarket Joint Public Agency. This is a special meeting being held today. Like all meetings, it's subject to the open meetings law. There will be public comment. There will be time limit on that comment. We would ask that individuals keep their remarks to 5 minutes and that they keep their remarks to the specific agenda items that are on the agenda for today, and we would ask them to identify themselves for the public record. With that, I think we're ready to go. To my right is Tim Clare with the Board of Regents, and to my left is Carl Eskridge with the City Council. And my name is Chris Beitler with the City of Lincoln, and we are the board that are here today to hear public comments and make decisions on the items on the agenda. So with that, I think we move to agenda item number 3, Resolution 18-32 that was introduced at our last meeting and held over for further public comment and action today. Chris, why don't you come up and renew our familiarity with that particular resolution?
Thank you, Chris Connolly, Chief Assistant City Attorney. I guess, Mayor, if it's all right with you, I'll talk again about both transactions since they really are related. Number one. Number two, since I did cover everything in full last time, if it's all right with you, I'll just sort of summarize where the transactions are and leave it open to questions and other testimony, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Okay. So we have two properties involved here. One that the JPA is purchasing, which is 215 South 7th Street, otherwise known as the Jacobson property. The JPA is purchasing that for $2,064,000 and is to be used as really part of further development in what's known as the Block 5 area, south of N Street in that area. And we consider that a pretty important area to acquire in order to help for the development of the Block 5 area. The parcel that's being sold is known as Block 2, and it is being sold for approximately $1.5 million and is going to be paid over time by South Canopy, LLC, who is the buyer, and is also the seller on the Jacobson property. There are numerous restrictions on the transaction that will require South Canopy to produce a building permit by November 1 of 2021 and to show substantial completion of the footings and foundation by the end of May of 2022. And those are really sort of the main points. Certainly there is a lot more to these agreements, but I think those are some of the main points for both of these transactions, and I'll be happy to answer questions that the board may have.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Are there questions of Chris? Yeah. Carl?
Yeah. So Chris, at our last meeting, there was a question raised about potential environmental issues relative to the property that we're looking to purchase. Could you, what have you found out about that? Yeah,
I've visited with Frank Ularic with the city, who was involved in the remediation process really throughout the West Haymarket area, and he has reviewed documentation from the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality concerning any environmental concerns with the Jacobson property. And it is his thought and a belief that we won't have to do any extensive remediation on the property, if at all. If an occupied building were to be built on the Jacobson property, then we may have to do some remediation that we think between testing and actual remediation may cost upwards of $25,000. But in any event, it's not extensive. We don't have any PCBs or lead contamination in that area, which is something that would be of much greater concern. There are some chemicals there, but nothing that rises to the level of being a danger to where we need to take action right away. If the area ends up being covered by concrete for either a plaza or street access or anything of that nature, it would act as a cap on this soil, and no further action would be necessary. Now for Block 2, we do have a no further action letter that was issued by NDEQ because of the extensive cleanup that was done in that area. This property is technically, the Jacobson property is technically off of the West Haymarket area, so it wasn't necessarily included directly in the initial remediation efforts.
It's close to the altar site, though.
Yes.
So, I mean, but it's downstream, I guess, downhill from, or the altar site is downhill from this site. So
correct, and there's
presumably that would have drained farther to the west and not in this direction.
Yes, yes, and there, as you look at it right now, if you were to look at it from Main Street, you'll see that there's actually a buildup on the what used to be called the altar site, that part of Block 5, and so when the Jacobson building gets demolished, it will probably also need to be raised up, which would further increase the cap that's on that piece of property. I couldn't tell you exactly how much it comes up, but it looks like it's a couple of feet or so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Chris?
Yeah, I've got a few. First off, I appreciate my colleagues in allowing this to be, I guess, delayed for a period of time. I think we've done a good job throughout the entirety of this project to make sure that transparency and access to information was paramount, and the public having that. And I know you all have done the same thing that I've done, and that is speak to different trade association groups and things to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening with our responsibility down in the West Haymarket Joint Public Agency. I spoke to 2 groups, and of course we were in the newspaper and in the news to try to make sure people had the ability to talk with us. And so I think that I wanted to start by saying that I spoke with stakeholders that had property down here, that had businesses down here, and in effect they were okay with the transaction itself as well. There was one question that one of the stakeholders raised, and I didn't see it in your conditions, and that had to do with architecture, and that the architecture that we've got down in the area, we'd like to obviously have that same amount of same style of architecture for subsequent buildings, and this being in particular. So have you spoken with South Canopy? I see they're in the audience. Have you spoken with them? Is the architecture going to be similar to what we have in the area right now?
I believe it is. Now, and what I would tell you is the reason why it's not in the agreement to purchase the Jacobson property is the same reason why we didn't get into specifics on the sale of Block 2. Yes, there are some restrictions on basically the size and the amount of the investment, but we specifically did not get into the architecture because that's really something that should be left for the redevelopment agreement, which would be separate from this, and would be done in working with the city. And so those kinds of issues are really better dealt in that agreement. However, in terms of what will be built on Block 2, we certainly expect that it will be the same kind of architecture that's in that area, and we're not sure what all we're going to do in the Block 5 area, but if there is commercial development down there, we would expect it to be the same.
And then the only other general question that people had relative to this transaction had to deal with timing, and that this gives the buyer the opportunity to extend over a period of up to, I believe, 3 years. And I think the demand is probably there. We'd like to maybe see if that can, yes, you're within if you wait till 3 years, but it would be, I think it would be appropriate if demand is there, which I believe it is, to try to get this going a little quicker so that we can have this taken care of and built out a little sooner. That was all. But I mean, I think as I said in the last meeting, you know, I want to publicly thank the Scotts, and I want to publicly also thank, you know, the Dunlops and the Clay Smiths and Speedway and the Whiteheads, and these are people that stuck their neck out in this area, and it's an area that has completely transformed Lincoln and has helped in the retention of young people. And so I see this as another area where, another opportunity where we can further that transformation and further what the public had in mind when we were starting this project, and it was to create a vibrant area for business, but also for retail and restaurants and so on. And so it's an exciting time, and one that again I see the Huddles and the Olsons and the grocery stores and these other places coming into downtown, and that's an exciting series of events that are occurring in Lincoln. And so I'm very grateful to you know, the parties and stakeholders that have been involved.
Anything further, Carl?
No.
Okay, is there a public comment?
Hello, my name is Robert Way, 801 Elevado Avenue, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68504. I had just a couple questions. The first question was, there are conditions if the project does not have, I think it's C on page 6, substantial completing of footings and foundations, and do you have that in front of you? The question I had was, what if the constructor starts construction and for whatever reason is not able to finish it? We all remember 2008. Sometimes a project can be good in June and terrible in September, and this, if we were to revert the property when construction had already begun, wouldn't that be a massive expense? Isn't that the same reason on this other property we have to take less than you might expect because we're going to have to do a bunch of work for that? So maybe there's a bond I didn't understand. A lot of this paperwork's beyond me, so if it's there, I'd be happy to hear about it. Secondly...
Do you want him to answer your question?
Yes, sir.
With regard to the footings and the foundation, the idea behind that was, it's our expectation that if they have to go to the expense of putting in foundations and footings with the kind of equipment that they're going to need to do this with for a very large building, that they will have already demonstrated that they have the financial capacity to complete the project. And what we didn't want to get into was where there's some risk that we sell them the property and for whatever reason the work never begins. So we wanted to see that there was a significant beginning to the project, and by putting in the footings and foundation, that's what would happen. Now, if they meet substantial completion and then begin actual building on the building and then it stops for whatever reason, at that point we would not have the capacity to take it back. That's true. But at that point there would be a lot of pressure on them to complete the project from a lot of sources. And quite frankly, I think that once they aren't going to get that far without having the financing lined up to get the entire project done. We're confident of that.
Well, the body has done a lot more of this work than me, so I don't know if that could not happen. So, but I understand what the gentleman has said. I had 2 more points, not specifically dealing with the contract as written. The property next door, in 1 year, the land value went from $518,460 to $1,036,920. I have that here. And we'll leave it to the council. So we're dealing with an area of Lincoln which seems to be seeing some dynamic changes in property value, and we've now gone from the 2018 evaluations went to 2019, and normally potato, but when you have that sort of change in the property next door, I don't know how that would affect this being a good deal for the JPA.
Okay.
I have one other question, but it's more generally about the JPA and how this project was authorized under the original bond, but I don't know if it's appropriate to bring that up now.
You're welcome to bring any question you would like to pose.
The last thing is I went back and I looked at the original Haymarket bond issue, and it seems that's been entered in the record.
Okay.
I was talking about this part right here. It seems that the JPA, at least the bond part of the JPA is described on the website as a quasi-government agency, and I really don't know what that means. That this use of money, which I assume is derived from the bonds, comes from the fact that it's related to the arena. And that was, I guess, what is this phase 2 expansion. I guess I'm out of time.
That's all right. Go ahead and finish your inquiry.
I just think that we're taking something we put before the voters, and now we're down to one part of one sentence to justify using this bond money, and I was surprised by that, and I don't know if everyone is aware this is where this project has evolved to.
Chris, why don't you come back up and address the question of the authority of the JPA and generally what it does in addition to the arena and the West Haymarket area and its authority with that in that regard.
Yeah, the Joint Public Agency is a separate political subdivision, and with regard to the bonds bonds were used for the construction of the arena. The JPA has other sources of revenue that it gets, and one of those is from sale of other parcels. And so that's the money that's being used as part of this purchase here.
But the foundation of the money was the bonds. Is that wrong?
The foundation of the construction of the arena was the bonds.
And the purchase of the land?
And purchase of the land, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. Well, in regard to Mr. Way's issue, we have protested all along that people did not vote for this expansion of the West Haymarket. And we felt that that was not presented to the public at the time as to exactly what they were approving. But that's old information, and I assume that nothing can be done about that unless you wanted to have some kind of big lawsuit, which that's way back in the road. A couple of our issues are the South Canopy. We hadn't heard of that before. We looked it up online, and the only information is that Andrew Willis of Klein, Williams, Wright, Johnson, and Old Father is listed as an agent. It says nothing about WRK. In the past, there has been issues before the City Council about WRK, their ability to be a landlord, their issues with their tenants not being happy with the way that they have handled the agreements. And there have also been issues about their managing of the public market, which of course has now gone kaput. And so we have issues about continuing to work with them without some kind of restrictions on their behaviors and so forth. Agent Clare mentioned stakeholders. He didn't say who the stakeholders are. Besides WRK, so I would like to have some clarification about who he talked to at that point. And South Canopy, WRK or whatever it is, seems to be making a tidy little profit of $64,000 on this property. I'm not sure that it has been explained that there was any negotiation to cut that profit for them. I'm glad Mr. Way has brought up information as far as the public is concerned, and we also have an issue about the present JPA making this agreement when 2 members will be changed in the space of 6 months, 8 months, and moving an agreement over to them without their consent or their ability to make any kind of renegotiation and so forth. If the footings are put in, then it sounds like they would have no power to renegotiate or to make any discussion about whether that was appropriate for the city or for their view of the city. So these are our issues as public comment.
Okay, is there any other further public comment? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to you want to take the second one?
I thought he talked about both of them together. Okay.
All right, then let's vote separately on the two motions, which would be agenda item number 3 and agenda item number 4. And let me say by way of reaction to the public comment that we continue to appreciate Jane and Mr. Way and others who have taken time to come and talk about the JPA and what's happening down there, and keeping us alert to perspectives that that should be shared and provide different points of view. So thank you, Jane. Carl.
And thank you. I took some time over the weekend to drive around this area, the South Haymarket area, and just to see what we have now and what's envisioned with the new downtown master plan. This is a transformational project. To acquire this property really is critical and makes a huge difference as to what's envisioned in the south of downtown area, and I'm excited to see what this can bring to us. Thank you.
Any further comment?
No, I think, again, the thanks to Nelnet, Speedway, U-Stop, and I neglected to say Chief, and I meant to bring them up as well, but they've been great partners and not without risk. You know, coming in and doing this is a big deal. So I do thank them for their commitment to the community, and you're right, Carl, it is transformational.
And I might add that I do believe that this connective piece that we're working on right now, which includes a public park, is a transference point in the sense of being a linchpin to promoting housing development and neighborhood development in the South Downtown area. So I think what we're doing now is making a very bright future possible for the South Downtown area and for our ability to attract a variety of housing alternatives down there in that particular area. So I feel very good about what's being done today, and I hope everybody in the city will. With that then, agenda item number 3, resolution 18-32, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Beitler?
Yes. It is approved. Agenda item number 4, WH 18-33, is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? Call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Beitler?
Yes, it is approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Beitler?
Yes, we are adjourned.